Hi, are you stuck with your dissertation? Today I want us to discuss about a very important part of writing your dissertation, the introduction. Now, in writing an introduction for your dissertation, there are so many things that you are supposed to look at. There are so many rules that you're supposed to follow. And today's video, I'll take you step by step on what you can include in your dissertation, what you can avoid, the things to step by step on how you can make it better, and most importantly, the content that should be contained in your dissertation introduction part. Now, introduction is most of the time called chapter one, which is the same thing. So, in chapter one, you are expected to introduce what you want to do. You are expected to take the reader step by step on what they expect to read in your research paper, what problem you are trying to solve, the objectives that you are going to achieve towards solving the problem, and if you have any hypotheses, you're also going to list them in chapter one, which we are calling the introduction. So let's get started. A dissertation introduction will have many things, and most important part of it is that it must be able to communicate the need or the importance of the research you're trying to do. And a dissertation, you'll have many sections that I'll discuss step by step, and I'll also give you the examples for each step. Now, a dissertation will have a background. Now, background of the study is basically trying to tell the reader what you're trying to do. Now, I'll list all the elements that are contained in a dissertation introduction, and then we will get into details of each one of them step by step. So, under a dissertation introduction, the first thing you want to have is an introduction of the study, a statement of the problem where you indicate the problem you intend to solve. You will also have the research objectives, and research objectives in most cases are connected with the research questions. So, objective simply means what do you want to do, and questions simply mean which questions do you want to answer through the study you are intending to do. Then you have research hypothesis. Now, it's very untypical to find an outline requiring you to provide research objectives, research questions, and research hypothesis. So they are most cases interchangeable, such that you may have an outline asking you to provide research objectives and research hypothesis, which is okay. In other instances, you have an outline asking you to provide research objective and research questions, which is still okay. So it really doesn't matter. Now, from there, another thing we need to notice is that the significance of the study is very important. So you must show the reader or the users of your research that that study is actually important in the community in solving the problems that are there, or the ones that you intend to solve. And that directs us to the scope of the study. Now, the scope of the study is how far is your study extending in terms of population, in terms of region, in terms of so many other things. So that's the basic outline. So the basic outline of a research dissertation introduction will have the 7 elements. These 7 elements are key in guiding what you're going to do in chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4 and chapter 5 of your dissertation. So the 7 elements, we look at one after the other, step by step. So let's start with the background of the study. So before we get started with the background of the study, I promised to provide examples for each step. And for us to do that effectively, we have to come up with a topic. And this topic, we are going to break it down and fit it into our introduction of the dissertation. So we have a working topic here: effects of drug and substance abuse on academic performance of college students. Now, this is a basic topic that does not have very broad considerations. For example, looking at it, you can see that we are trying to do something that seems like a descriptive study. We are trying to describe a scenario that's already existing. So with our topic, we will fit every element of the 7 items I've shown you required in the introduction and see how it can work. Now, for every topic, then there must be variables. And that's why in this presentation, I'm showing you some working variables. Now, variables can only be 2. In some instances, there are 3. I'll explain what I mean. The first category is the independent variable. Now, independent variables are normally things that cannot be changed. So they stand, and those are the ones that remain the same. And through the combination that you make between the independent variables, they are going to have an influence on the dependent variable. Independent variables can also be called explainer variable because they try to explain a situation how it is. And the first one we can have is effect of drugs on substance abuse on academic performance of college students. The first variable you can have is memory loss. So memory loss is a variable because when you use drugs, one of the things that's likely to happen is you are going to lose memory. And then another thing you can have is a delinquency. This is a bad behaviors among students, and that's obviously is going to affect their education. And then the other one is a student who use drug. They are most likely be coming to class late. They don't have time to do assignment. As we are saying, lack of time is another important independent variable. So we want to see how is use of drugs or abuse of drugs going to cause memory loss, and what effect does memory loss have on education. The same way, how does the use of drugs going to cause delinquency among college students, and how is that going to affect their performance, and so on and so forth. The same way, we are going to look at the time. How is drug use leading to lack of time among students, and how will it affect academic performance? Now we have a dependent variable, which is academic performance. We are calling it dependent because it relies on the memory of the student. It relies on the memory of the student. It relies on good behaviors of the student. It also relies on the availability of time of the student. So if a student has no memory, has has bad behaviors, has no time to study, most likely the academic performance will be very poor. So that's how we are saying it depends on the above variables. So I told you there can be three or more categories of variables. The main ones we have here are independent variables and dependent variables. We also have others like intervening variables, etc. But in this study, we want to make it simple for you to understand. So we have our working topic and we have variables, both independent and dependent. Let's see what we are supposed to include in the background of the study. So a background of the study must have one key element. Remember, this is the very first paragraph of your dissertation under chapter 1, which is also called introduction. So you need to lay out your topic. Laying out the topic does not mean writing the topic. No, it means explaining about the topic. If there are keywords used in the topic, tell the reader about them. If you look at our topic here, you will see that we have effect of drugs and substance abuse. Probably someone want to know what do you mean by substance abuse and to what extent can it be called an abuse. Then you also need to explain things like academic performance. What are you looking at? Is it, does someone need to have an A to be called a good performer? Does someone need to improve from one grade to the other to be called a good performer? What if the person who was scoring an A reduces with 1 point? Is that still good performance? So that's what you're going to explain in the first part of the your layout of the topic. So in the layout of the topic, things that are expected are very basic. Definitions. Remember, it's not definition of terms. It is operational definition. So it's the view of the researcher. So what do you mean by academic performance? So the other thing you need to look at is the dynamic of the problem from the scope of. So the problem that you are trying to address is not unique in your country. It's not unique in your region. It's also presented elsewhere. So how is it elsewhere? So how are the drug use and abuse uh, affecting academic performance among college students in other places? So to have an example here, under the layout, you can say the term drug is defined as any substance that may modify one or more of its physiological functions when absorbed into a living organism. Term is generally used in reference to substance taken for both therapeutic purpose and abused substances. So if you look at the basic foundation of laying out the topic, it simply means letting the reader know or your target audience know what are you talking about, what is your topic about. So what do you mean by drug abuse? What do you mean by substance abuse? What do you mean by academic performance? So you're going to extend this discussion by having many views of what you mean in your topic. Then you need to look at the topic from the perspective of other places. That's why I'm saying look at the dynamics of your problem from the scope of one, international scope. So we are discussing drug abuse, drug and substance abuse in your region or in your target area. Now, how is it going on in other places? Is there drug abuse? And has it been affecting academic, or is it only your region? That's why it's important to look at what is happening internationally. Then you come narrowing that down. You narrow down to your region. So if it's your continent, so internationally means all over the world. So you can use a case study of a far country or a far continent and how it has been affecting academics. Then you narrow that down into your region. So what is happening in your region? Your region could be a block, it could be an economic block, could be an education block, could be a continent, could be a country. And then you're going to narrow that even more down to the dynamics of the local. So you need to localize that problem. So if you're having a case study, let's say you're having a case study on the effect of drug and substance abuse in XYZ school or institution. That's where now you're going to, in the third part of your problem scope, you're going to look at what is happening in your school, what is happening in your village, what is happening in your community. Now that starts from a broader picture. Narrow that down into a situation where you start with what is happening abroad, what is happening within your country, and then narrow that down further into your specific target population. Now from there, we need to know the problem. We don't know the problem yet. You have just given us the background. You have laid the foundation. We need to know the problem that you are trying to solve. And under the problem, there are many things that you need to know. Now, the problem must be very clear, such that the reader needs to know what is the problem, how is it a problem, when did it start becoming the problem, and who is affected by the problem, and how are they affected by that particular problem. So those 5 key questions are very important when you're writing your problem statement or the statement of the problem. Now, to make it clearer for you, this is how you can arrange your statement of the problem. Now start with the ideal situation. This means how is it supposed to be? That's the first thing you need to look at. Now, and at looking at how it's supposed to be, you need to give us the situation, the best scenario when students are not using drugs. Let's have an example here. Now, we're saying that secondary school education is regarded as the most important stage in educational cycle of a child, as it is the level at which learner acquire proficiency in both academic and applied subjects and the foundation of further education and work. Now, that's how it's supposed to be, meaning secondary school education is key, is fundamental, because that's the foundation for one's career, for one's discovery of talent, and for one's future success and growth. Now, that's how it's supposed to be. But is it always the case? No. And we are blaming all this on drug abuse and drug and substance abuse. So ideally, education at a secondary school level is supposed to be very important. So you're supposed to eliminate all the problems that can make it ineffective. So once you laid down your ideal situation, now we need to know what is happening. Then, if that is how it is supposed to be, how is it now? That's where you write the current situation. Now, the current situation means realistically, how is it? Is high school education largely important as you have explained above? No, that's why we are having a problem. And that's where your problem comes in. And the problem is drugs and substance abuse. Drug and substance have impacted students' academic performance by affecting their health, discipline, and behavior. Remember, they have affected their health, discipline, and behavior. So as you can see here, you have an element of health, you have an element of behavior, and then you have an element of discipline, and you have an element of behavior. Now, this behavior could be behavior where students just change and they don't have time to read, they don't have time to do assignment, they don't have time to go to class, etc. Now, in terms of health, it means students are always sick. Students do not have mental uprightness required to remember learning concepts. Discipline could mean they have started insulting teachers, they are fighting in class because of drugs. If you look at these three elements, and then you go back a little bit where we raised our working topic here, you can see that memory loss can be attributed to a health issue. So because you're living a bad lifestyle, so you are going to lose the memory. Delinquency means you have changed, you are not a good student. So you have changed, you don't have good discipline. Then lack of time can be attributed to changes in your behavior such that you no longer have the normal routine that you used to have as a student. Then you can also add that drug and substance abuse lead to many problems in school, especially strike, defiant behavior, etc., etc., and then you provide a reference. Notice that you're supposed to heavily reference your statement of the problem, and it is advisable for you to use very current references, meaning references for peer-reviewed journals that were done 2 to 3 years ago, not more than 3 years. So if you write a journal that was covered 5 years ago, it means that there is a preceding research that is more current and might have solved some of the problem you are trying to solve here already. So use very current references, and also use references that are peer reviewed. Also use references that are within your region. So don't reference in this area. Don't reference authors that are in Africa. If you are in Asia, don't reference authors that are in Australia. If you are in US, it's always important to focus on your area at this level. So I'll show you where you're going to diversify your reference as we proceed. So now we have two main ingredients here. We have how is it supposed to be? That is the ideal situation. How is it now? Then we're asking ourselves, is there a gap? Then, because we are doing a research, there is always a gap. Then we say, so what? We have a gap, we have how it's supposed to be, and we have how it is now. And what are we supposed to do about those two differences? Let's see. So, under so what, this means therefore, after we have found this gap, therefore, we want to do A, B, C, D to be in a position to solve this problem. So you'd say, although several researchers references, you provide reference there. So although several researchers, now here you can provide many references. Remember, they must be current and they must be researchers who have already worked on the problem you're trying to solve. That is the problem of drug and substance abuse. Although several researchers provide references have suggested preventative measures, the desired result of curbing the menace of drug and substance abuse have yet to be achieved, as the social problem continues to affect hundreds of thousands of college students, if not millions. Therefore, this study aims to investigate insert the topic there. Remember our topic? So you insert your topic there. So the study aims to investigate the effect of drug and substance abuse on the performance of high school student or college student, and provide a recommendation for controlling drug menace among youths. So we have found that in the statement of the problem, there are key questions that you need to ask yourself. The 5 questions. What is the problem? When is it a problem? How is it a problem? Who is it affecting? etc. Then once you're writing your statement of the problem, you want to start with how is it supposed to be? And then how is it now? And then what you are going to do as a researcher are going to do to solve the difference. Okay, let's proceed on. The third element you want to have in your research paper is the research objective. You cannot conduct any research without an objective. An objective simply means what do you want to do? What are you trying to do? And all the objectives are extracted from your variable. So every variable is going to raise an objective. So you normally have 2 types of objectives. The main objective, that means the overall objective. So everything that you want to do at the end of the day, is to solve the main objective. Remember, the main objective is always extracted from the topic. Then you're going to have the specific objectives, which means these are the individual elements that you discovered as the variables for your study. So in the main objectives, we say that the overall objective of the study is to investigate the inserted topic, which is the effect of drug and substance abuse on academic performance of college students. Then you go to specific objectives. These are going to be derived from your variables. Remember, we raised 3 variables. You can have more, you can have many, depending with what you want to do. And depending with the guidance of your supervisor, you can have as many specific objectives as you want. So one of the specific objectives is to establish the effect of memory loss. Remember this variable here, memory loss. So to establish the effect of memory loss due to drug and substance abuse on academic performance of college students. The other specific objective is to determine the effect of delinquency due to drug and substance abuse on academic performance of college students. So those are 2 objectives. Then remember, we had 3 variables. So the third objective would be to find out the effect of students' time wastage during drug and substance abuse on academic performance of college students. Now, that's a complete objective section where you have main objective, specific objective. Remember, specific objectives are derived from the variables. In cases where you have a moderating or an intervening variable, you're going to add it as the 4th objective. If you have many objectives, you keep adding them as many as they are. Remember, every objective is a representation of a variable. Like we had the memory loss variable, we had the delinquency variable, and then we have a time wastage variable. Okay, so let's proceed. Research questions. So when you have provided your objectives, that means the things you want to solve, there are questions that you want to ask yourself in the process of writing your research paper. And these questions are very key, and they determine how well you are going to have your paper complete and whether it's going to be the right paper or not, whether it's going to answer the questions at the end of the day or not. So under research questions, you are simply going to convert your variables into questions, as you can see here, and it has to be a question. As you can see here, what are the effects of memory loss due to drug and substance abuse on academic performance of college students? We are asking a question. And at the end of the day, once we've done our research, we've collected the data, we've analyzed the data, and we have described the data, we need to come back and ask ourselves, did we answer the question that we raised in chapter 1? So that's one of the questions. Remember, again, every question will be a representation of every variable. So our first variable here was memory loss. Yeah, that's the first variable. And as you can remember, the second variable is about delinquency. The third variable is about time wastage. So in research questions, you're going to write questions based on each variable. Then you can do the other 2. I believe I've guided you enough. So you can do question 2 and then do question 3 to see whether you are understanding. If you don't get it right, you can comment. Then you have research hypothesis. Now, hypotheses are the things that you want to test. Remember, there are 2 types of hypothesis. A hypothesis can be null or alternative. When you are writing your chapter 1, you always use null hypothesis. Remember, null hypotheses are negative hypotheses. Now, they are the researcher's hypothesis. The hypothesis that the researcher is in the process of finding the truth concerning a certain topic. So this is an example of a hypothesis. Remember, this is a hypothesis, which is null hypothesis, abbreviated as a H0. You say memory loss due to drug and substance abuse has no statistical significance on the academic performance of college students. Remember, we have said that they need to be negative. So we say has no statistical significance. So we are starting from the negative side and saying memory loss does not affect academic performance. So memory loss due to use of drugs does not affect academic performance. So we need to go and do research to prove ourselves right or wrong. So once we've done with all the data analysis and everything, we are going to either approve or disapprove null hypothesis. That's why we normally indicate null hypothesis. So we don't approve or disapprove alternative hypothesis. No. Alternative hypotheses are adopted in case we have disapproved null hypothesis, but the main focus is always on the null hypothesis. Again, every hypothesis should be raised from every variable within my study. Our first variable was memory loss, second variable was the delinquency, third variable was time loss. So using the same structure, you can write hypothesis for number 2, that is variable number 2 and variable number 3. Then we proceed, and then we see from the hypothesis now, we need to find out whether this study will be important to any of the people that we intend to benefit from this research. That's why we have a topic called significance of the study. Now that you are doing a research, the question you want to answer is this research going to be important to anyone? Yeah. So there are so many stakeholders in a research paper, and the primary stakeholders are normally the people you are targeting, that your target population are the main beneficiaries of your work. So is this research going to help anyone? Okay, let's see. So the first person who can benefit is the school. Not necessarily the school that you are targeting, but the schools everywhere. Remember, your study can be generalizable, meaning the outcome of your study can be used to explain a phenomenon in another place, in another country, in another region, or in another continent. So schools are going to benefit from your study if it provides recommendation on how school management can control use of drugs. Then another beneficiary are the students; those are the target population. The parent will also benefit. The lobby groups within the community will also benefit. And finally, the society in general. So the community need to know how drugs are affecting their students. Now, out of this is very clear. So I will not take too much time in it. I'll just give you an example of how the school can benefit. So it's expected that school managers and teachers would also use the finding to prepare more effective lessons on drugs and substances and prevention. So we are saying if we do this study the right way, the school is going to use the data that we are going to generate to understand how they can prepare lesson plans that are geared towards cautioning students on drug and substance abuse. So every category here is going to benefit differently. So for example, students are going to learn that if they use drugs, their memory will be affected, they will develop bad behaviors, and they will not have time to do the assignment and go to class, and so on and so on. So under the significance of the study, it's always good to provide or to indicate the person who is benefiting or the group of people who are benefiting. In our case, we have 5 groups, that is school, student, parent, global groups, and society in general. Then finally, the last part of our discussion is on the scope of the study. Scope of the study means now that you are doing a research paper, how far do you want to extend it? How far is this? What are the reaching effects of the study? Now, in the scope of the study, the things to include are your topic. We need to know the topic that you are bound with. If you look at our topic here, we said that we are focusing on drug and substance abuse, on the performance of college students, on the academic performance of the college student. You can see we are already limited. The scope is college student. We are not going to primary or lower grade student. We are focusing on college student. Now that means a scope. Then you need to have the guiding variables. Guiding variable means what variables are you using? Are you using all the variables? Are you using 10 variables? Are you using 5 variables? Are you using 3 variables? Notice that most of the study will normally have between 3 to 6 variables. Beyond that, it can be a very long study that can even take years and years and years to complete. So variables are normally between 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And beyond that, that would mean they are too many. And if you not have a study with one variable, it's very unlikely. So you need to have indicate the variables in this section. Then you also need to indicate the region of focus. So you need to say, are you doing this study for US? Are you doing this study for UK? Are you doing this study for Australia? Are you doing this study for China? Are you doing this study for Africa? So the scope of the study under the region is to ensure that you are telling the reader where are you going to focus, concentrate data collection on. Then you need to have the other part is the target population. Everybody who reading your paper need to know who are you targeting to collect this data. Now from our topic, it's very clear that we are targeting academic institution in college level, and we are also targeting students. Then the other thing you need to include is the sample size. Sample size means, do you want to focus on all the college students in your country? Do you want to focus on all the college students in your institution, or do you want to sample them into a smaller group that can be managed? Then finally, you need to have the study period. Study period means at what time, okay, not really time, but which period are you conducting your study? Is it in 2023? Is it in 2024? Is it in, so that we can know this study outcome or this sample was targeted in 2023, January or February or whatever month that you are intending to conduct your study. So under the scope of the study, the main thing you need to remember is that you need to show the reader the limit of your study by giving them the topic, the variables, the area, that is the country, the community, the village you are focusing on, the target population, the sample size you are going to use, and the most importantly, the study period. The study period simply means at what time are you focusing on the data collection that you are intending. So there you have it. Dissertation introduction and the 7 items that are the key ingredients to making it a successful research paper. That's it. I hope everything is clear. Thank you.